The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. We do that every week by sharing the stories and advice of people rocking it from the other side. In this episode, you will learn from two people, Alyssa Meyers and Kelsey Sutton, who both write for Marketing Brew. Marketing Brew's team of 6 editors delivers 5 or more marketing newsletters a week, paired with additional articles and deep dives, and they put on events where they discuss the latest industry trends. Topics they cover include marketing, advertising, agencies, crypto, influencers, media, social media, and streaming. Gino asks them about the current macro trends in advertising, their predictions, and their overall assessment of the industry. Alyssa and Kelsey are people you want to follow. Their newsletter is perfect for aspiring marketers or seasoned vets, and Marketing Brew should be on your bookmark bar. In addition to Marketing Brew, they list out additional resources tailored just for you, the aspiring advertiser, on our Instagram. For all the details, check out Breaking and Entering Pod. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. And as per not usual, this is your official audio production accomplice, Maxwell. Kick it, Mikey.
Kelsey Sutton and Alyssa Meyers, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you two doing today? Alyssa, how are you doing today?
Doing well, trying not to breathe in too much of the New York City air, but happy to be here.
Is that because it's extra smelly or what's going on in New York?
Worse than usual. Yeah, we've got the smoke from the Canadian wildfires, which is, you can truly smell it. It smells like smoke. It's something else.
That is wild. And I heard is it orange out there? Like, what is it?
It's kind
like
of changing. It was orange this morning where I am in Brooklyn. It's more like yellowish now. It's an ever-evolving hue.
Okay. So, but you're safe.
Yes.
Kelsey, are you safe over there?
I am. It's a little Mad Max vibes outside, but staying inside. Good day to record a podcast from the safety and comfort of my own home. So thanks for having us.
Of course. Well, I hope everything's good over in New York. It's probably going to come down soon or come across our way. So in Chicago, I'm sure of that. So today we're not here to talk about that, although I feel free to cover that if you want. But we're here to talk about you two, about Marketing Brew, about what you two write about, how Marketing Brew can be a great resource for aspiring advertisers, and your insights and what you know and what's going on with the industry and what you cover and teaching our listeners what's happening in the world of advertising and marketing. So I'm excited to talk to you both. I don't do combo episodes all the time, so I'll do my best to navigate this, and I'll do my best to direct questions to you, Alyssa and Kelsey, individually, so it's not too confusing. Sound good?
Sounds great. We will navigate with you.
All right.
We'll do our best to try not to talk over each other too much.
I think we'll be just fine. So I think a good place to start is if you two can both kind of describe Marketing Brew high level and your roles within Marketing Brew.
Yeah, this will be funny. I wonder if Kelsey's description will be vastly different than mine. But I'll try to keep my one sentence description. We are a 5-day-a-week B2B business newsletter that tries to cover the whole marketing and advertising industry in a way that's hopefully fun. That being said, in addition to the two of us, we only have 3 other reporters on the team. So we all kind of touch a lot of different areas of the industry. I focus a lot of my work on audio, so podcast advertising, sonic branding, music and ads, things like that, and sports marketing as well this year. So that is kind of my focus area, and Kelsey covers lots of other stuff too.
Yeah, well, Alyssa, I was going to say we have the same, I think, pretty same spiel. We publish 5 days a week. I write about TV. So the upfronts, the new fronts, cable television, streaming is a huge focus. And I cover kind of all parts of the business. And I also edit Alyssa and other members of our team as deputy editor. So we are a small but mighty team.
I love it. What do the other editors cover that aren't on the show right now?
That's a good question. We have someone who I would say Ryan is kind of like our ad tech guy, but he covers lots of other stuff. Katie is hard to describe. She's kind of like culture, hits on some agencies stuff, like yeah, culture. I don't know. What would you say Katie covers, Kelsey?
I would say influencers a lot. So influencer marketing, whether that's Instagram, TikTok. But you're right, Alyssa, she also writes about big cultural moments and how that intersects with advertising. And then Jasmine is our newest reporter, and she really runs the gamut. She writes about agencies, she writes about trends, she writes about new things. So again, we all have to be a little bit jacks of all trades because we are a small team. And of course, the advertising business is massive and ever evolving and ever changing, which is why it's fun to write about and fun to cover.
Yeah, I'm looking at the subheadings now. You got brands, agencies, tech, marketing, brand marketing. I think all some really important areas. So to clarify, so this is a daily newsletter. So I guess how do you position yourself differently from the other ad trade publications out there?
That's a good question. I think part of it, the easiest first part is that we have a lot of fun. We try to be kind of like funny, quippy, I think, in the newsletter. It was harder for me to kind of adapt to that writing style than I thought it would be when I first came on a year and a half ago, because it's not something I really had experience with at other publications. I worked at newspapers, I worked at big digital media outlets, and it was never something that was asked of me before to kind of try to incorporate a joke into a story or something like that. So I think that's kind of a big value add that we hopefully give to our readers. We also, for a long time, and I think we still are pretty focused on kind of evergreen, larger feature stories that really, really like get into the bigger trends in the industry, as opposed to just today's news, breaking news, one company, one example. So yeah, I think that's something else that we try to lean into to differentiate.
Yeah, I think the bird's eye view is kind of something we try to have a good perspective on. Since we look at this day in and day out, we try to say, okay, what does it mean that 6 companies are doing this thing or 8 companies are doing this thing? Like, what can we tell you about this broader industry trend versus like this one thing happened? Of course, we do that in the newsletter, and it's nice. The newsletter gives us space to say, here's something that happened today. And then we have the time to go and say, what is that? Let's contextualize it. Let's put that into perspective so that you can kind of understand why that matters, why we care about that. And I also think that besides, we're trying to inform people while having fun, we also really are cognizant that the industry is full of jargon and can sometimes be really confusing. And we really, I think part of our ethos is we need it to be clear. We need people to understand what's happening. And if you read an article and it has 35 jargony words, you are going to walk away from that not knowing anything more than you did going into it. So we kind of keep a close eye on that. Like, if we can't explain it in layman's terms, like, what are we doing? So we always do that. We always say, okay, we need to explain this in terms that a reader who is plugged into the industry, but maybe is not an expert at ad tech, will be able to understand, right? We'll be able to come out and say, right, because that's such a perfect example. And Ryan on our team, Ryan Barwick, does a great job of that. Like, if you're too in the weeds, like someone's like, this is Greek to me. I don't know what's happening. I can't understand this. And that's not helpful to anybody, right? And I think so that's something we really keep in mind. We don't want to make someone feel like they're dumb if they're reading something and they're like, what does this even mean? Like, we ask those questions for you, right? If we're like, if you don't know what this means, here's what this means, and then let's get on with the story and tell you why it matters. Sounds
perfect for our audience on breaking and entering, right? And also, if it's too jargony, they're just not going to finish reading it, right? They might not come back. So the fact that you're welcoming and you do take the time to explain, and you do have a welcoming, fun with some humor in the tone, that helps a lot too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So do you find that people are mostly reading like the daily emails, or are they going to the site, or is it a combo? What do you think the consumer journey is to reading your content?
That is a really good question. I am always of two minds about how much I want to know about, how readers are engaging with our work and with the newsletter and with the site. I've had experiences in the past with publications that get so bogged down in the numbers and the clicks, and it becomes really competitive. And it, I think, influences the way you report and the stories you tell in maybe not the best way. I think we thankfully don't have this culture on our team. I think we look at it kind of holistically too. We look at obviously, our subscriber numbers, but maybe not necessarily like which individual story or reporter drove the most subscribers. I think that that's kind of a really good team mentality to look at. Just from talking to sources and readers, I kind of get the sense that people mostly engage with us through the newsletter. Like people know Morning Brew as a newsletter brand. That's where they kind of see us first and foremost. And we obviously hope that they click out to the longer stories that we put on the site, because that's usually the format we do. If we have a big feature, the top of it, some of it is kind of aggregated in the newsletter so that you don't have to read the whole thing if you don't have the time that particular day. But of course, we hope that it's interesting enough that you will click out to the full stories.
Gotcha. I'm now looking at, tell me about the deep dives that you guys do. Because I see the sports marketing deep dive. What's the concept here, and what are you trying to achieve here?
Alyssa,
Kelsey, I don't know if you want to. Yeah, you see everyone's stories as an editor, so you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea on the deep dives is so the deep dives kind of on our site are really kind of section hubs. So do you want to kind of read a lot about a certain topic? And we've collected them, curated them. So, okay, great. You can read a number of articles about this. But I think that our philosophy in general is like there are shorter stories that are newsy that we want to tell people about. Like, here's this really interesting piece of research, or something interesting happened. There was an interesting campaign, or, an interesting information about HBO Max rebranding to Max, to talk about my beat. But then there's these bigger stories, right, as we talked about. And so I think the deep dive concept is also, we need to give space for topics to breathe. And you're not going to solve the questions of influencer marketing in one article, and there's no reason that we should try to do that. So instead, let's try to cover it from a lot of different angles, a lot of different perspectives, so that when you read it, you can read that and you can make smarter decisions. You can get smarter at your job. You can have a better understanding of what's going on industry wide, and that helps you kind of be a more informed person. So that's kind of, I think, our philosophy.
I think this is great, and I think it's all very clear and very easy and very seamless. It seems like the perfect resource for an aspiring advertiser, and I'm being completely genuine when I say that. And you even have events going on. And is there anything else that you want to kind of set out into the world, and what makes you guys a little bit different from the other ad trades that I haven't asked about?
You plugged our events team a little bit. I think it's awesome to give them a shout out. We just came off of our second annual Marketing Brew conference called The Brief.
How was that?
It went really well as far as I could tell. I want to give all the credit to our events team, because as a reporter, they make it so easy for us. We basically just show up and get on stage when they tell us to. But they handle, bringing in all of these incredible CMOs for us to interview on stage. The venue, the food is always awesome. It seemed like it was a packed crowd, and you should. I think I'm sure we'll do another one next year. But hopefully the events team is taking a well-deserved breath after this year's.
Yeah. What'd you guys talk? What was the main theme this year?
We talked about so many things.
I know.
I see that you had General Motors, Duolingo, OkCupid. Sounds amazing. It looks fun too.
It was really fun. We had people just kind of from all over. We had Bobby Brown. I got to interview Bobby Brown on stage, which was pretty cool. She's so smart. We talked about B2B marketing. We talked about building your career and kind of being ambitious. I think it was the CEO of Kickstarter who said on stage, like, he told his boss, like, I want your job one day, and how do I get there?
Yeah.
It brings
Heck
a lot
yeah.
of people who are really ambitious and I think really want to learn, and it's a great environment to be in. And it's fun for us because we get to interview really interesting people on stage and learn things from them, and then, you know, get to helps us tell, you know, better stories and be better reporters, right? Is being able to talk to somebody and get information from them and then, you know, write it down, or we can spin it out into an idea for our next story.
I hear you. I want to switch gears though. And I am very curious because, you know, we don't have a lot of journalists on the show, but when we do, I want to definitely capitalize and learn as much as possible on what your view of the industry is today. So I know you have different beats. So whether or not, I want you each to go and just kind of talk about what are some of those high level trends that you're noticing, whether that's in advertising and marketing in general, or if you want to get granular within your specific beat, I'll let you speak freely on it. But Alyssa, if you want to kick us off, that'd be wonderful. Because I'm always thinking about, well, actually, I'm not thinking, I mean, like, I'm not even looking at the industry as much as a whole because I'm so focused in on the podcast and where I work specifically in our client work. So when I was a student, I was so passionate about learning about the entire industry and seeing everything holistically. And now I'm kind of getting a little bit tunnel vision. So it's a breath of fresh air when I can hear from you two.
Yeah, that's relatable. I think we could all get a little bit of tunnel vision with certain parts of the industry because it's so massive. I mean, saying I cover marketing, it's almost like saying I cover business, you know, it's so
Yeah.
broad.
Yeah.
Everything is marketing. There have been the history of my few years covering marketing. There have been stories that I've pitched that, like, the marketing angle is just so loose, but we find it anyway, and you can always make it work. I think obviously saw a big macro trend that we and everyone else has been covering over the past year is, unfortunately, economic conditions. I will say I feel like I've been hearing a little bit less lately about, you know, sort of like the larger economic impact on the ad market. I don't know if that's truly a reflection of times changing or if we're just getting into the summer months and sources are having a little more fun and I kind of want to take a break from it. It could be that. Definitely something I heard a lot about on the podcast beat in particular. I think one trend there related to the economic conditions, especially earlier this year, coming off the back of 2022 and even 2021 pandemic days in that industry and in that business. There was obviously such a massive growth and interest in people listening to podcasts while they were at home in lockdown. And then in the couple of years coming out, ad revenue for, you know, podcast companies, audio companies that sell any sort of podcast advertising, that podcast ad revenue was just like exploding for the past couple of years. Late last year, early this year. Yeah.
I didn't get any of that. Missed out on that.
Maybe another time, but
make it happen.
Yeah, I think lately, you know, like that there's been some questions about if that's shifting, if there are, you know, economic factors that are causing an ad spend slowdown in podcasting, if it's something that's just bound to happen after huge growth, you have to kind of slow down, come back to earth. If it's related to larger trends in the industry, you know, Spotify doing layoffs, if that is really a telling factor of how the industry as a whole is doing. I am not 100% convinced that it is. But yeah, there is kind of some broad trends that I have been noticing. And on my beat, I don't know, maybe if there's something economic wise that you want to speak to in the TV market, Kels.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's so interesting, Alyssa, when you talk about, like, you know, the pandemic did this, and then we had this sense of like what that was going to mean for an industry. And now we're kind of, I mean, I don't want to say we're out of the pandemic, but people are acting as if we are, like, right? And so it's kind of like, that's a weird way to characterize it. But like, there's sort of the COVID spike in so many, and by the COVID spike, I mean like the COVID like podcast consumption spike or the streaming consumption spike. You can see all these weird consumer habits that were kind of temporary, but we didn't know how temporary they were going to be and what that was going to look like. And now we're kind of seeing this continued like evolution of that. And I think that's made it really hard for people to understand like where consumers are reachable and where they're going to be and for how long. And I think that factors into, you know, streaming, right? There was this huge surge in people signing up for streaming services, watching tons and tons of programming, watching tons and tons of ads. And now it's like, okay, well, where are those people going? What's the actual regular baseline of consumption? Because we really haven't seen that, right? We had several years of people living kind of weird lives. And there is this equilibrium that I don't think has totally been reached, but is being reached. And that just has, I think, a lot of really implications for where consumers are, how you reach them. And I think that fits into this broader, you know, industry-wide grappling with kind of consumer fragmentation. Where are consumers? How can you track them from point A to point B to point C? Do you measure them? How do you measure them? And are you reaching the right people? Because there is certain swaths of the population that are really hard to reach on one platform and really hard to reach on another platform, or you just don't know who you're reaching. And I think that that's kind of this continued, we have a lot of companies saying that they've solved for that. And I think it's still a little bit of, it's still a little ways away from feeling like we really have a good grasp on that. And I think that just has a lot of implications for where advertisers spend their money and what that looks like for the broader industry, right? And all the industries supported by those advertiser dollars and the decisions that advertisers make, right? I mean, advertising makes the world go round, right? Like the advertising dollars are so important to so many industries. And I just think it's such an interesting time to kind of watch that evolve. And there's a lot of things that maybe were super certain a couple years ago, and now it's kind of anyone's guess as to like who's gonna win, who's gonna come out on top.
Can you share your predictions and what you think will happen?
Well, I'll talk specifically about streaming, since that's sort of my expertise. That's where I spend a lot of time. I think that there are winners today who may not be the winners of tomorrow. And I think there's a question of broader consolidation in the industry. We've seen a ton of consolidation. Warner Brothers Discovery is a consolidation. Disney and Fox, that was several years ago now, but that was a consolidation. Mm-hmm. So there was just this huge consolidation. There might be more. There's lots of thoughts about what that's going to mean. And then the question is like, who's able to build an advertising platform that really can deliver what, cable and network has delivered advertisers for so long. And I think that's kind of where I really mean it's anyone's guess, because consumers are a little bit fickle. And when you have like 8 different options of where you want to watch a show, right, it's not 3 networks, and it's not, just a couple cable providers. It's really, really fragmented. And so I think the question is like, who can build a platform that like gives advertisers A, the people that they need to reach, and B, like the information that they need so that they understand if that worked or not, right? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, you reach this person. It's another thing. How do you measure? Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of underpinning all of this, right? Like, it's one thing to spend your money and know that you reached X amount of people. It's a whole other thing to be able to say, and did they buy anything? Like, did they, right? Like, that's still kind of, and I think especially, I mean, I'm rambling, so I apologize, but then we get into privacy regulations and legislation and what that looks like, because that kind of throws a wrench into the whole thing of being able to tell, are people doing what you want them to do when you're spending millions of dollars advertising to them? And that's kind of why, it's an open question. I would not be surprised to see if Viacom CBS or NBC Universal looked for more scale, whatever that might look like, buying a movie studio, consolidating further. So I feel like that's kind of the eyes are on them, but we're also getting into an environment that may not be as regulatorily friendly to corporate tie-ups. So, it's anyone's ball game. We'll see. But it's such a different landscape than it was a couple of years ago when investors were like, here's $1 billion, like just get as many people watching your streaming service as you want. Like now people want results, and that's hard. Results are hard.
Yeah, no, and I'm learning a lot, right? Like I appreciate you sharing all of that. What are the implications, I guess, like what are the main learnings for the audience here? Like the people that want to break into marketing or advertising, of everything you're talking about, like what are some of the takeaways that they can apply in their career search as they're looking?
There were some things that Kelsey hit on actually that I was almost in my head being like, I think that is a topic or a question that everyone on our team asks about, regardless of our B, regardless of what we're covering. So I wonder if that would translate to, maybe like some early topics that if you're just getting into marketing, you should keep your mind on no matter what area of it. I think one of them being sort of like targeting and measurement. I feel like every one of us, no matter what we're covering, we always ask some sort of question of like, okay, how do you measure it? Something like that. Super interesting. Always an interesting answer. All of us ask it all the time. It comes up I feel like you can't talk about a marketing or ad campaign without talking about that. Kind of related to sort of like targeting and privacy. That is always, I feel like, a topic that comes up that I've heard so much about. That seems to be something that you should really have a grip on if you are going into an interview with a marketer, you want to be a marketer. Again, it applies in podcasting and audio. It applies in streaming. It's obviously super relevant in ad tech. Agencies have to deal with it. If you're talking about big cultural topics, like how specific can you get in your targeting and the ethical implications of that. I think there's so much stuff like to dive into that are really sort of in the weeds topics like that. It feels, especially starting out. I started covering marketing in 2019, not that long ago. There's so much to wrap your head around. It's really confusing. Like Kelsey said, there's a lot of jargon. So maybe those are a couple things you want to look into. There's lots of other topics too. And I would say kind of find one thing you're really passionate about and learn that. And it could take years. It's taken me years to learn, one or two little specific areas of the ad industry. But it's been rewarding. So that has worked for me at least.
Yeah. But I also think, Alyssa, the way that you kind of frame that, how do you measure it is I love that. I ask that all the time. Like, what's the privacy implications? But I also kind of think that it's really, the industry is really complicated, but I always try to think about it. And I approach my stories this way too, is thinking about it as a consumer, how do I consume media? Where am I spending my time?
I was going to ask you that when you were talking. Right? I was exactly going to ask you that.
Because it's if you're I am spending, I don't know, I'm just flipping between Max and Hulu and Disney Plus, and I am paying for the ad-free tiers on all of them. Doesn't that has implications for the marketing approach, right? If I'm unreachable because I spend X amount of money, and maybe as an early career person, you should drop down to the ad-supported tiers to save yourself a few dollars. But I kind of think about that. It's not just. I think marketing is it's interesting because it's consumer facing. You're interacting with marketing every day in some capacity. You open up Instagram, you're going to see an ad. You walk outside, you're going to see an ad, right? You open up a magazine, you're going to see an ad. So I think that can help you. That can also make it a little bit easier. It feels like really daunting, but if you're kind of like, how do I spend my time? Like, what implications does that? How do my friends spend their time? Like, where are they seeing ads? What's resonating with them? I feel like is not. Obviously, that's a specific subsection, right? Because you're one person. Your friend group is like a certain type, like going to be certain types of people, certain ages. But that can help you also kind of. I don't know. It gives you a sense of like, what is the ecosystem that we're even dealing with? Like, is this, and then you can go, okay, what's the most interesting thing that I thought of? Like, how does Hulu work? I spend a lot of time on Hulu. I saw an ad on Hulu. How does that work? And like, just start there. And then you can kind of start, I don't know, backtracking and then figuring out like, okay, what is that? I don't know. I feel like maybe that's a good way to back into it without it feeling completely overwhelming. Because, right, if you're like, why am I seeing a targeted ad on like this weird website that I just went to? Like that might be a little daunting, but like if you take it one step at a time, it can help give you a sense of like what the media landscape looks like and how it works, right? So you can start to see the through lines.
I like how you're calling out awareness, right? You should be, if you're an aspiring marketer, aspiring advertiser, you should be walking around and you should have open eyes to what is coming your way. When you're being sold something, you should acknowledge it, right? Because, you're eventually going to be doing that. So to have that awareness and then the curiosity and then to work backwards, do the phones listen to you? What everybody asks me that. I don't know. Personally, I don't know. I don't know how that works. But maybe I should, right? Like maybe I should do that research. And maybe our listeners are like, if I'm known as the advertising friend, they like, if people ask me, well, do our phones listen to you? Or how come these retargeted ads are always popping up on my search? And I looked up Nike shoes once and now I'm seeing it a million times. You should be like, okay, let me actually like look into this. And then, there is retargeting and there are ways to do this. And then working backwards as well. And then developing your own strategies in the future and figuring out how the creative can tie into those retargeting messages. I love that. And just it starts off with that awareness.
If your friend group is not talking about third-party cookies, what are you talking about?
Yeah, my friend... I've seen those memes. Like your friend group is 25 years old. They should be talking about third-party cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my friends would not appreciate if I brought up these advertising topics over drinks, and nor would I want to. But I do think, Kelsey, you have a good point there of like, talk about sort of the experience. I think it comes up naturally, like you guys said. I mean, you can't escape ads anywhere. Like there is not a single person that doesn't have experience with advertising, which kind of comes back to the point we were talking about. Like it's just such a massive industry to cover and it touches everything.
Well, I think also too, like.
Go ahead,
Kelsey.
I just was going to say it goes beyond awareness too. Like it's also like the self-acknowledging, like, why did that work on me? Or why didn't that work on me? Like, it's not just saying like, I saw that ad, but like, did that work? Like, why did I buy this? I feel like that's also kind of a good question to kind of be asking yourself.
I love that. For me,
yeah, I will expose myself as being susceptible to advertising. Sorry, Gino, what were you going to say?
I'll buy stuff on TikTok gets me. If I see somebody that it's not a sponsored post and it's like some sort of person that has some credibility and says, go buy these gym shoes, it helped me out in the gym, or these supplements, like you see, that's how my TikTok is. And it's like Dr. Andrew Huberman saying ashwagandha is good for your mood stability. I'm like, oh, well, I'll look into that actually. And I might buy it. That social credit.
I kind of try almost to get like targeted sponsored posts. If I'm shopping for something, like if I'm shopping for a pair of shoes, I'll Google like, hey, I need new shoes in Brooklyn, and like not even do anything, like close out of the tab and then be like, I hope that I see some shoes on Instagram tomorrow.
So some people think it's creepy and weird that we're getting personalized and custom ads. I love it. I'm like, that's what I want. Like, I don't want to see stuff that's not tailored to me and the media buy isn't centered towards me. Like, I like when stuff can be, like, it's stuff that I want and it's relevant to me. But I don't know. That's just me.
I tend to agree. I also I get it. I get why it's scary to some people. And I have obviously seen like egregious examples of targeting crossing the line. But I am generally of the mindset, honestly, that like my browser history, my personal information is not that valuable. Like, have at it.
Yeah. Got nothing to hide.
Isn't it funny though that
That's
TikTok
a larger
works so well though? Like, you know, you were saying like you buy, I do that too. I've been like, oh, this person, I like them. They have nice skin. What moisturizer do they use? Like, and then I buy, and you know, like, so I mean, but again, then the question is like, okay, what does that mean for if that's your job, selling moisturizer? Like, why did that work for that person? Should you reach out to that person? Like, or is there a way that you get, you know, how do you do that in a way that is effective, right?
Well, the dream job is to be the person that's selling it, to be the influencer. Like, that's the goal.
Right.
And I think we covered a lot of great topics, but I think, so when people want to dive in more, is Marketing Brew a place to go to where they can learn more about contextual advertising or your beats, or like the stuff that we talked about, like the details behind the targeting, and like, is that the resource, or is that a starting point, or is it a completely different source?
100%. I think it is a good starting point, especially for all these topics. Everything we hit on, we've covered. We have done stories that are so in the weeds about ad tech. I have written about audio specific ad tech. Ryan has done the world's most in the weeds stories about privacy law and things like that. We also cover, you know, big, broad, I hate to say more fun, but, you know, some of the more cultural topics that don't require such a deep understanding of some of the jargon and some of the terms. We really cover it all. And hopefully, like Kelsey was saying before, whether it's a more larger culturally relevant topic that anyone, even if you're not in marketing, would care about, or if it's something very advertising specific, we hope that it is kind of digestible and a good jumping off point if you're brand new to it, and helpful too, even if you're a pro. So I think, you know, that's our approach.
Something we also try to do is sometimes we'll just ask like a question to each other, like, why did I watch this basketball game and like there were no, like the ad breaks just didn't get filled? Like, why? And then we're like, okay, I actually don't know. Great question. And then we just go talk to like all these people who tell us why that's happening. So I feel like it's kind of a mix of like, sometimes you can go really deep and sometimes we're like, that was weird. Why did that happen? And then we just go and seek out to answer it. I think everyone on our team is really curious, and we like to know how it works and why sometimes it might not work in that case. So we're looking, I mean, we want readers who are also asking those questions. Like, if you have questions for us, like, tell us, because we might be wondering it too, and then maybe we'll write an article about it.
I love it. How can people reach out to you both if they have any questions or want to learn more?
Please do. I am probably most reachable weirdly on email. I'm good about my email, Alyssa@morningbrew.com. Send me a note, please.
Same. My email is Sutton, Sutton, @morningbrew.com. And you can also find me on Twitter, although I'm not on there all that often anymore, but it's Kelsey M. Sutton, @Kelsey M. Sutton.
Amazing. And I'm sure they're going to be, you know I wanted to talk about your careers and how you broke into journalism and the specific beats, but I think that would be a great question for those people that are interested. They can reach out. Is it okay if they want to get more career oriented on your backgrounds and how you broke into this?
Absolutely. Please.
Amazing.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. It was amazing.
Thank you, Gino. This was a lot of fun.
This was so fun. Thanks for having us, Gino.
Thank you so much.